My name is Melinda Harrington, and at 67 years old, I never imagined I would have to fight for the home I designed and built with my own hands. 30 years of memories filled these walls until my son Jason and his wife Amanda moved in temporarily 2 years ago. I still remember the shock when my own son screamed at me, "Don't you dare argue with my wife in her house." I stood frozen, wondering how the home I created became someone else's territory. Before I tell you what happened when I finally stood up for myself, let me know where you're watching from, and hit that subscribe button if you've ever had to choose between peace and dignity. The story of my home began 35 years ago when I was a young, ambitious architect with a vision. My husband Thomas and I had saved every penny for 10 years to buy the perfect piece of land overlooking a small lake in the suburbs of Portland. The property had been overpriced for most buyers because of its odd shape and steep gradient, but where others saw problems, I saw potential. As an architect, I knew I could design something that would work with the land rather than against it. Thomas was a high school math teacher with a talent for woodworking. We made the perfect team. I designed, he built. We spent weekends clearing the land ourselves, marking the foundation and planning every detail. I still remember the day we broke ground. Thomas kissed my cheek and said, "Build us something that will outlast us both, Mel." And I tried. God knows I tried. The house took 3 years to complete as we worked on it whenever we had time and money. Every paycheck went straight into lumber concrete fixtures and finishes. We did much of the work ourselves, calling in professionals only when absolutely necessary. I designed a 3-level home that cascaded down the hillside with large windows to capture the lake view from every room. The main living area featured a 20-foot vaulted ceiling with exposed Douglas fir beams that Thomas hand-finished. Our son Jason was just 10 when we started building. He would help his father mix cement and hand him tools. Thomas would patiently explain each process, teaching him the value of creating something with your own hands. "This house is our legacy, son," he would say. "Someday long after Mom and I are gone, you'll bring your children here and tell them how we built this place together." The irony of those words still stings me today. The kitchen was my masterpiece, custom maple cabinets with a massive island where we would gather for family meals. The countertops were polished granite that Thomas and I installed ourselves over one grueling weekend. Each bathroom featured unique tile work that I designed, and set myself staying up late into the night perfecting patterns that would never be found in another home. Thomas died 5 years ago, a sudden heart attack while working in his beloved garden. The tomatoes he planted that morning still produced fruit all summer, as if he was sending me little reminders that life continues. The first year without him was a fog of grief and loneliness. The house, that had once felt like our greatest accomplishment, suddenly seemed too big, too empty, too full of ghosts. I considered selling it briefly, but couldn't bear to part with the last project we had created together. Instead, I threw myself into maintaining it perfectly, just as Thomas would have wanted. I was just beginning to find my footing again when Jason called with news that changed everything. He and Amanda had been evicted from their apartment after Jason lost his job at the tech startup where he'd worked for 3 years. They needed a place to stay just until they got back on their feet. A few months at most, Jason assured me. Of course I said yes immediately. What mother wouldn't? Jason was 38, and while he had always struggled with financial stability, I believed this was just another temporary setback. Amanda was his third wife, 15 years younger, and working as a marketing consultant for small businesses. I had only met her a handful of times at holiday gatherings, but she had always been polite if somewhat reserved. When they arrived with a small U-Haul of possessions, Amanda hugged me tightly and expressed such gratitude. "This house is absolutely stunning, Melinda," she gushed as she walked through the front door. "I can't believe you designed it yourself. We promise we won't be a burden." She seemed genuinely appreciative of the spacious guest suite I had prepared for them on the lower level, a bedroom with an attached sitting room and private bath that I had originally designed as an in-law apartment. Those first few weeks were actually pleasant. We ate dinner together most evenings, and I enjoyed having company again after years of eating alone. Amanda complimented my cooking and asked thoughtful questions about the house's design features. Jason seemed more relaxed than I had seen him in years, no longer carrying the stress of mounting bills and rent payments. I allowed myself to hope that this arrangement might be a blessing in disguise, a chance to rebuild my relationship with my son and get to know my new daughter-in-law better. Perhaps Thomas had been looking out for us, creating this opportunity for our family to grow closer. The first sign that something was changing came about a month after they moved in. I came home from my book club to find the living room furniture rearranged. The sofa that had always faced the lake view now had its back to it, and the reading chair where Thomas used to sit had been moved to the corner to make room for a large exercise bike that Amanda had apparently purchased that day. "We hope you don't mind," Amanda said when she saw my expression. "The feng shui just wasn't working for us, and I need to keep up with my exercise routine." I swallowed my discomfort and smiled. "Of course it's fine," I said, even as I felt a small twinge of unease. It was just furniture after all. And if it made them comfortable, wasn't that more important than my attachment to the way things had been? But that was just the beginning. I started noticing Amanda referring to our house when speaking to friends on the phone or in conversation with the neighbors. At first I thought she was just being inclusive, considering it our shared home for the time being. But then I overheard her telling her mother on the phone, "We're so lucky to have this place. It's perfect for entertaining. We're thinking of hosting Christmas this year for everyone." She hadn't discussed Christmas plans with me at all. In fact, I had already started planning my usual small gathering with my sister Catherine and her family, as we had done since Thomas passed. When I gently mentioned this to Jason that evening, he brushed it off. "Mom Amanda's just excited about having space to host. Her family's never had a real Christmas in a nice place. Can't you be a little flexible?" I agreed, of course. What else could I do? But as I lay in bed that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in my home, and I wasn't sure I was ready for it. The transformation of my home happened so gradually that, looking back, I'm amazed I didn't see the pattern sooner. Perhaps I was too eager to have family around me again, or maybe I was still navigating the fog of grief that occasionally descended when I least expected it. Whatever the reason, I allowed small changes to accumulate until they became my new normal. By the 6th month of their stay, Amanda had completely taken over the kitchen. It started with subtle comments about my cooking. "This chicken is a little dry. Melinda," or "Have you ever considered using less salt?" Eventually, she offered to handle the meal planning and grocery shopping, presenting it as a way to contribute to the household. "You've been cooking for decades," she said one evening, after critiquing my lasagna recipe. "Let me take this burden off your hands. I've been learning all these amazing healthy recipes that Jason loves." I relinquished my kitchen, the heart of the home I had designed so meticulously. Soon my carefully organized cabinets were rearranged according to Amanda's system. My copper cookware that Thomas had given me for our 25th anniversary was replaced with Amanda's non-stick pans and stored in the basement because copper leaches toxins into food. My spice drawer was emptied of jars I had collected from around the world and replaced with uniform containers labeled in Amanda's precise handwriting. Meanwhile, Jason's promise to find a new job quickly seemed forgotten. When I gently asked about his job search over breakfast one morning, he sighed dramatically. "Mom, you don't understand today's job market. Companies aren't loyal anymore. I'm being selective because I don't want to end up in another toxic workplace." Amanda quickly jumped to his defense. Jason's networking skills are his greatest asset. He's building relationships that will lead to the right opportunity. It's an investment in our future. What neither of them mentioned was that this investment was being funded by my retirement savings. While they weren't paying rent, the household expenses had nearly doubled since their arrival. Grocery bills skyrocketed as Amanda insisted on organic everything and specialty items I had never heard of. The utility bills increased dramatically as they kept the air conditioning running constantly even when no one was home. 6 months stretched into 8, then 10. Each room in my house slowly transformed. The guest bedroom was completely redecorated, with new furniture Amanda had ordered online, charging it to my credit card with a breezy, "We'll pay you back," once Jason's new job comes through. The living room walls, once adorned with family photos and artwork Thomas and I had collected during our travels, were now covered with large canvas prints of Amanda's family and abstract art pieces. She insisted tied the room together. Better. My photos were carefully packed away in boxes and stored in the attic, just temporarily, Amanda assured me, until we figure out a cohesive gallery wall concept. Even the garden wasn't spared. Thomas had been an avid gardener, creating beautiful perennial beds that bloomed from early spring through late fall. Amanda decided the maintenance was too much and hired landscapers to replace most of it with river rock and a few potted plants that required minimal care. When I expressed my heartbreak over losing Thomas's garden, Jason said, "Mom, you couldn't keep up with it anyway. Amanda's just trying to make things easier for you." The space I occupied in my own home grew smaller and smaller. I found myself retreating to my bedroom earlier each evening, avoiding the constant criticism and the feeling that I was a guest in my own house. I started taking my morning coffee out to the deck just to find a moment of peace before Amanda woke up and began reorganizing another corner of my life. I kept telling myself it was temporary, that they would move out eventually, and I could reclaim my space. I didn't want to create conflict. After Thomas died, I had promised myself I would nurture my relationship with Jason, my only child. If tolerating some changes to my home was the price of keeping him close, wasn't that worth paying? But the turning point came 13 months into their stay. Thomas had built a beautiful cherry wood display cabinet for my collection of art glass. It was one of the few pieces of furniture he had crafted himself, spending months perfecting each joint and detail. I kept it in the dining room where the afternoon sun would catch the colored glass and cast rainbow patterns across the table. I came home from a dental appointment to find the cabinet gone. In its place stood a sleek white console table, decorated with fashionable coffee table books and a large orchid. My heart raced as I searched the house, finally finding the cabinet in the garage, my carefully curated glass collection packed haphazardly in a plastic bin. When I confronted Amanda, trying to keep my voice steady, she seemed genuinely confused by my reaction. That old cabinet was so dated, Melinda. It was bringing down the whole aesthetic of the dining room. I found this gorgeous console on sale and thought you'd be pleased with the update. But Thomas made that cabinet, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. She patted my arm condescendingly. I know you're sentimental about these things, but it's been 5 years. Don't you think Thomas would want you to move on and update the house? The cabinet is still in the garage, if you want to put it in your bedroom. I looked to Jason for support, but he was scrolling through his phone, barely paying attention to the conversation. When he finally looked up and saw my expression, he sighed. "Mom, don't make this into a big deal. It's just furniture." Just furniture. The cabinet that Thomas had spent 6 months creating, often working late into the night after long days of teaching, was just furniture. The man who had built our home alongside me, board by board, had been reduced to outdated decor that didn't fit Amanda's aesthetic. That night I cried myself to sleep, for the first time since the early days after Thomas's death. But this time my tears weren't just grief. They were tinged with anger and a growing realization that I had allowed myself to be slowly erased from my own home. The incident with Thomas's cabinet marked a turning point. What had been a slow, almost imperceptible shift in household dynamics now accelerated into more open assertions of control and ownership. I began noticing things I had previously overlooked or excused, and with each new observation my discomfort grew. 3 weeks after the cabinet episode, Amanda announced that her parents and sisters would be visiting for a long weekend. This was the first I'd heard of any planned visit. "I've been meaning to tell you," she said casually, as she arranged flowers in the living room. "They'll arrive Thursday and stay until Monday. I've already prepared the guest rooms." Guest rooms. Plural. I had only one additional guest room beyond the suite Amanda and Jason occupied. When I inquired where everyone would sleep, Amanda explained she had temporarily converted my home office into another bedroom by removing my desk and bringing in an air mattress. "Your office was just collecting dust anyway," she said with a dismissive wave. "When was the last time you actually used it?" The truth was, I used it less frequently because I felt uncomfortable working in there while they were home. Amanda had a habit of interrupting me with trivial questions or comments about how the room could be better utilized. So I had taken to checking my emails and paying bills at the small desk in my bedroom, another concession I had made, without even realizing it. When Amanda's family arrived, I was struck by how they treated the home, as if it belonged exclusively to Amanda. Her mother Barbara walked through rooms, making comments about what Amanda should change next. "This wallpaper in the powder room has to go, dear, and these light fixtures are so outdated." They discussed renovation plans in front of me as if I were invisible or perhaps just the hired help. At one point, Amanda's father, Douglas, asked me to bring him a beer while I was in the kitchen, preparing snacks they had requested. Not, "Would you mind getting me a beer," but, "Bring me one of those imported beers from the refrigerator I had purchased, in the kitchen I had designed, in the home I had built." The final insult came on Saturday evening when I discovered I had not been included in their dinner plans. I came downstairs dressed for dinner to find them all preparing to leave. "Oh, Melinda," Amanda said, looking momentarily flustered. "We assumed you wouldn't want to join us. It's a tapas restaurant with such loud music, and we'll be out late. We thought you'd prefer a quiet evening at home." I hadn't been asked. I had been assumed out of their plans in my own home. Jason avoided eye contact as they filed out the door, and I stood in the entryway watching them drive away in 2 cars, mine and Jason's. The house felt eerily quiet after they left. I wandered through the rooms that no longer felt like mine, touching surfaces and looking at spaces where my things used to be. When had I become a guest in my own life? When had my son become so distant that he couldn't even meet my eyes? The next morning, Amanda's sister Tiffany asked if she could speak with me privately. We sat on the deck overlooking what remained of Thomas's garden, and she surprised me with her candor. "Amanda has always been like this," she said quietly, glancing toward the house to ensure we weren't overheard. Growing up, she would appropriate anything she admired. Our parents thought it was cute how determined she was, but my other sisters and I saw it for what it was. "What was it?" I asked, both disturbed and relieved to have my perceptions validated. Conquest, Tiffany said simply. Amanda doesn't want things because she loves them. She wants them to prove she can have them. She hesitated before adding, "Just be careful." She's mentioned several times that she and Jason will inherit this house someday anyway, so they might as well make it theirs now. The conversation left me deeply unsettled. That evening, after Amanda's family departed, I attempted to gently establish some boundaries. I suggested that in the future it would be nice to have advance notice of house guests and to be included in plans made in my home. "Are you seriously giving me rules right now?" Amanda's voice took on the sharp edge I had come to dread. "After we've done so much to improve this place, do you know how many compliments I get on the changes we've made?" Jason predictably took her side. "Mom, you're being difficult. Amanda has put so much effort into updating this place. You should be grateful. Grateful that she's erased every trace of your father from our home." The words escaped before I could stop them. Amanda stormed out of the room in tears, and Jason glared at me. "Now look what you've done. Why do you have to be so selfish?" Selfish. The accusation stunned me into silence. How had setting the smallest boundary in my own home become an act of selfishness? The following week brought another unwelcome surprise. Amanda's younger sister Natalie arrived with a suitcase and a cat carrier. Apparently, she had broken up with her boyfriend and needed a place to stay just until she found a new apartment. No one had consulted me about this arrangement. "It's just for a few weeks," Jason assured me when he saw my expression. "She's family. We couldn't turn her away." We. As if the decision had been equally his to make. As if the home equally belonged to him and Amanda. Natalie took over the newly converted guest room that had once been my office. Her cat, despite my allergies, had free run of the house. When I mentioned the allergies, Amanda suggested I take antihistamines rather than restricting the cat's movements. "Snowball needs to explore her new territory," she explained, as if my health concerns were an inconvenience to her plans. By this point, I was becoming increasingly aware of how completely I had been sidelined in my own home. I made another attempt to discuss boundaries with Jason when Amanda was out one afternoon. "Honey, I love having you here, but I think we need to clarify some house rules and perhaps discuss a timeline for when you and Amanda might find your own place." Jason's response was dismissive. "Mom, Amanda has put so much work into making this place livable. You should see it as a blessing that she's taken over managing the house. You were letting it get run down after Dad died." His words stung deeply. Yes, there had been a period after Thomas's death when I had struggled to keep up with home maintenance, but I had hired help for the tasks I couldn't manage myself. The house had never been run down. But Jason's perception had clearly been shaped by Amanda's narrative. "Besides," he continued, "you have this huge house all to yourself. It makes more sense for us to live here and take care of it for you. You're not getting any younger, Mom." I was 67, not 97. I was in good health, still drove, volunteered twice a week, and maintained an active social life. The implication that I needed caretaking was both insulting and revealing of their true intentions. Over the next several weeks, I noticed more concerning signs. Neighbors began referring to Amanda as the homeowner when they spoke to me. "Your daughter-in-law mentioned she's planning to redo the landscaping in spring," or "Amanda invited us to a barbecue next weekend." She had inserted herself so completely into the role of lady of the house that the community had accepted the transition. My breaking point nearly came when I overheard Amanda on the phone with her interior designer friend. They were discussing plans for my bedroom, my personal private space. Once we move Melinda to the smaller guest room, I want to convert the master suite into our dream space, she was saying. The walk-in closet needs a complete overhaul, and that bathroom is straight out of the 90s. I'm thinking a soaking tub where the shower is now, and maybe knocking out that wall to create a sitting area. They were planning to move me out of my own bedroom, the room I had shared with Thomas for decades. The room where he had held my hand through nights of grief after we lost a baby to miscarriage. The room where he had died his head on my lap before the ambulance could arrive. They saw it as square footage to be claimed, redesigned, and occupied. That night I couldn't sleep. I paced my bedroom looking at the space through Amanda's eyes and seeing all the ways she would erase the last remnants of my life with Thomas. By morning I had reached a decision. This could not continue, but I needed more information before I acted. The day after overhearing Amanda's renovation plans, I waited until the house was empty to do something I had never imagined doing. I searched Jason's home office. The guilt I felt was quickly overshadowed by what I discovered. In the bottom drawer of the desk that had once been Thomas's, I found a folder labeled Property. Inside were printouts of local real estate listings, mortgage calculators showing payment plans they couldn't possibly afford on Jason's non-existent income, and most disturbingly, several pages of notes about elder law and penned 1DC, property rights in our state. One page contained highlighted sections about undue influence and transfer of property ownership, with notes in Amanda's handwriting about how assets could be legally transferred from parent to child. Another page detailed the requirements for establishing legal guardianship over an elderly parent, with particular attention to how cognitive decline could be documented and used as evidence. I felt physically ill as I carefully returned everything to its precise location. They weren't just living in my home, they were actively planning to take it from me. The realization sent me into a panic attack, the first I'd experienced since the early days after Thomas's death. I sat on the floor of my bathroom, trying to steady my breathing and clear my head. Once I had calmed myself, I called Barbara, my oldest friend, and a family attorney who had helped with Thomas's estate. We agreed to meet for lunch at a restaurant 30 minutes away, where there was no chance of running into Amanda or Jason. Barbara listened intently as I detailed the events of the past 18 months, occasionally taking notes. When I finished, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "Melinda, I hate to say this, but what you're describing sounds like classic elder exploitation. They're isolating you, gaslighting you about your capabilities, taking financial advantage, and now actively researching how to legally take your property." Her expression was grave. "Has Jason asked you about changing your will or adding his name to the deed?" The question triggered a memory that had seemed innocuous at the time, but now took on sinister implications. 3 months earlier, Jason had mentioned that adding his name to the house deed would simplify things and ensure I was taken care of if anything happened to me. He suggested it might help with property taxes too, I recalled. I told him I'd think about it, but it felt unnecessary. Barbara nodded grimly. That would have given him immediate partial ownership. He could have forced a sale, or worse, if he had financial troubles. And from what you've told me, financial troubles seem to be their constant state. But why would Amanda want my house so badly? It's beautiful, but it's not a mansion. They could buy something with the money they both should be earning. People like Amanda don't want things they can earn, Barbara said, echoing Tiffany's earlier warning. They want things they can take. It gives them a sense of power. We spent the next hour developing a plan. Barbara confirmed that as the sole owner of the property, I had every legal right to ask them to leave. She helped me understand my options and the potential repercussions of each. You need to be prepared for emotional manipulation, guilt trips, and possibly even threats, she warned. But remember, this is your home. You built it. You paid for it. You maintained it. And you have the absolute right to control who lives in it and how it's used. I left our lunch feeling simultaneously terrified and resolved. That evening, I decided to make one final attempt at reasonable conversation before taking more drastic measures. I prepared Thomas's famous lasagna recipe, the one Amanda had criticized, and set the dining room table nicely. During dinner, I calmly brought up my concerns. I've been thinking a lot about our living arrangement, I began. It's been almost 2 years now, and while I've enjoyed having family close, I think it's time we discussed your plans for finding your own place. Amanda's fork clattered against her plate. Is this because I mentioned redecorating your bedroom? It was supposed to be a surprise, a gift to thank you for everything. Moving me out of my own bedroom isn't a gift, Amanda, I said quietly. And that's just one example of how I've been made to feel like a guest in my own home. That's completely unfair, Jason interjected. After everything Amanda has done to improve this place, the house looks better than it ever has. Different doesn't mean better, I replied. This was the home your father and I built together. Every choice we made had meaning. Oh, here we go with Dad again, Jason rolled his eyes. It's been 5 years, Mom. You can't keep this place as a shrine forever. It's not about keeping it as a shrine. It's about respect. Respect for my home, my memories, and my right to make decisions about my own property. Amanda pushed her plate away dramatically. I have done nothing but try to help you modernize this dated house, and this is the thanks I get: accusations and ingratitude. Amanda, you moved your sister in without asking me. You've taken over every room. You've criticized my cooking, my decorating, even my gardening. You've excluded me from plans in my own home. That's not help. That's control. Amanda's eyes filled with tears, a reaction I had come to recognize as her go-to response when confronted. Jason, are you going to let her talk to me like this? Jason's face flushed with anger. Mom, apologize to Amanda right now. I felt a strange calm settle over me. No, I won't apologize for setting boundaries in my own home. That's when it happened. Jason stood up so violently his chair toppled backward. He leaned across the table, his face contorted with rage I had never seen directed at me before. Don't you dare argue with my wife in her house, he shouted, slamming his palm on the table hard enough to make the glasses jump. The room fell silent. Even Amanda looked startled by his outburst. I sat perfectly still, absorbing the full impact of his words. Her house. My son believed this home that his father and I had built with our own hands, the home where he had grown up, belonged to his wife of 3 years. Her house, I finally said, my voice barely audible. The house your father and I designed and built before you were even born. The house we raised you in. The house that is still in my name alone, and that I have allowed you to live in out of kindness. Jason's expression faltered slightly, but Amanda quickly recovered. She began sobbing dramatically, burying her face in her hands. I can't take this anymore. I've tried so hard, and nothing is ever good enough. Jason immediately shifted his focus to comforting her. Look what you've done, he hissed at me. Are you happy now? I stood up slowly, gathering my dignity around me like armor. I think we all need some time to cool down. We can continue this conversation tomorrow, when everyone is calmer. I walked out of the dining room, leaving them with Amanda's sobs as the soundtrack to their evening. As I closed my bedroom door, I heard Jason consoling her. "Don't worry, honey, she'll get over it. This is our home now, and she needs to accept that." Their home. In that moment, any lingering doubt about what I needed to do vanished completely. Sleep eluded me that night. I lay awake, replaying Jason's words, trying to reconcile the son I had raised with the man who had shouted at me across my dining room table. How had we arrived at this point? Had I enabled this behavior by being too accommodating, too willing to prioritize peace over boundaries? By dawn, I had made my decision. I called Catherine, my younger sister, who lived an hour away. Catherine had never warmed to Amanda, something I had attributed to overprotectiveness, but now recognized as better judgment than my own. "I need your help," I told her, explaining the situation in detail. "They're planning to take over completely, Kathy. They've been researching how to take legal control of my house and possibly even guardianship over me." Catherine's response was immediate and unequivocal. "I'm coming over right now and we're packing your essentials. You're staying with me until we get them out of your house." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not leaving my home. They are." After talking through options with Catherine, I called Barbara again. As both my attorney and friend, she was uniquely positioned to help me navigate this situation legally and emotionally. "I want them out," I said simply. "What's the most effective way to make that happen?" Barbara outlined the legal process for eviction, but suggested we start with a less confrontational approach. "Given what you've discovered about their research into elder law, I'm concerned they might try to claim you're mentally incompetent if you take immediate legal action. Let's be strategic." We developed a careful plan. Barbara would help me document the condition of the house, their patterns of financial dependence, and any evidence of their plans to take over. Meanwhile, I would secure my important documents, valuables, and irreplaceable mementos. "The key is to act with confidence and clarity," Barbara advised. "No anger, no accusations, just calm, factual statements about your property and your expectations." Over the next 3 days, I moved carefully, gathering information while presenting a conciliatory facade to Jason and Amanda. I discovered that not only had they not been looking for jobs, but Amanda had also been lying about freelance work she claimed to be doing. Her supposed marketing clients didn't exist. They had been living entirely off my retirement savings for nearly 2 years. I found credit card statements showing purchases of luxury items, pardoms, designer clothes, expensive electronics, even spa weekends, all charged to my accounts. They had been systematically draining my finances while positioning themselves to take my home. Most disturbingly, I uncovered emails between Jason and a contractor discussing extensive renovation plans for when the house is ours. The plans included removing walls I had specifically designed to preserve the architectural integrity of the home and turning Thomas's woodworking shop in the basement into a home theater. Each discovery strengthened my resolve. This was no longer about setting boundaries. It was about protecting myself and the home that represented my life's work from people who saw it only as an asset to be acquired and altered. Fortune provided an unexpected opportunity when Amanda announced they would be attending a weekend wedding in Seattle, flying out Friday morning and returning Sunday evening. "Natalie will be staying at a friend's, so you'll have the house to yourself for a few days," Amanda said, as if granting me a special privilege in my own home. As soon as their car left for the airport, I put my plan into motion. Catherine arrived with coffee, and determination followed shortly by Barbara and a locksmith I had hired after careful research. "Are you absolutely certain you want to do this?" Barbara asked one final time. "Once we change the locks, there's no going back. They will be angry, possibly even threatening." I looked around at what remained of the home Thomas and I had created. I'm certain. This is my home and I want it back. While the locksmith worked on changing every external lock and reprogramming the garage door opener, Catherine and I carefully packed Jason and Amanda's belongings. We weren't vindictive. Clothes were folded neatly, fragile items wrapped in packing paper, everything treated with more respect than they had shown my possessions. "Should we pack Natalie's things too?" Catherine asked. Everything, I confirmed. She moved in without asking, and she'll leave the same way. By afternoon, the garage was filled with neatly labeled boxes containing their possessions. The locksmith finished his work and programmed new codes for the security system. I paid him generously for his discretion and efficiency. Next came the more emotional task, reclaiming my spaces. We moved the living room furniture back to its original arrangement, rehung family photos, and retrieved Thomas's belongings from their exile in the garage and attic. The cabinet he had made returned to its place of honor in the dining room, my art glass collection carefully arranged inside. Barbara documented everything with photographs, creating a record of the condition of the house and possessions. She also helped me draft a formal letter explaining that their tenancy was terminated, listing the reasons and the legal basis for my decision. Remember, she cautioned, they may try to claim tenant rights, since they've lived here so long even without a lease or rent payments. If they do, we're prepared to counter with evidence of their financial exploitation and plans to take over your property. By Saturday evening, the transformation was complete. My home looked and felt like mine again. Catherine stayed overnight both for moral support and as a witness to whatever might unfold upon their return. "Are you nervous?" she asked, as we sat on the deck with glasses of wine watching the sunset over the lake. Terrified, I admitted, but also relieved. I should have done this a year ago. "You wanted to believe the best of your son," Catherine said gently. "That's what good mothers do." Does a good mother change the locks on her child? A good mother teaches her child about consequences and respect, Catherine replied, even when that child is 40 years old. Sunday afternoon, I sat alone in my reclaimed living room, watching through the window for their return. Catherine had gone home after extracting a promise that I would call her immediately if things escalated. Barbara was on standby, ready to intervene if necessary. The letter we had drafted was on the entry table, along with Jason's old house key that no longer worked. At 4:30, I heard a car in the driveway. My heart hammered against my ribs, but my resolve remained firm. Through the window, I watched their initial confusion as Jason's key failed to open the front door. Then came the predictable progression. Repeated attempts, checking to make sure they had the right key, and finally the doorbell. I took a deep breath, straightened my shoulders, and prepared to reclaim not just my home but my dignity. I approached the front door with deliberate calm, my heart racing despite my outward composure. Through the security camera feed on my phone, I could see Jason's confused expression turn to irritation as he repeatedly pressed the doorbell. Amanda stood behind him, tapping her foot impatiently, already visibly annoyed by this unexpected inconvenience. Rather than opening the door, I pressed the intercom button. "Hello, Jason, Amanda. I hope the wedding was lovely." Mom Jason's voice registered surprise. "The key isn't working. Did you change the locks?" "Yes, I did," I replied simply. There was a moment of stunned silence before Amanda pushed forward. "Very funny, Melinda. Open the door, we're tired from traveling." "I'm afraid I can't do that. Your tenancy in my home has been terminated." Jason's face contorted with disbelief. "What are you talking about? This is ridiculous. Open the door right now." "There's a letter explaining everything on the porch table." I continued, my voice steady despite my trembling hands. "Your belongings have been packed carefully and stored in the garage. I've arranged for you to stay at the Extended Stay Hotel on Riverside Drive for 1 week paid in advance. That should give you time to make more permanent arrangements. Amanda's reaction was immediate and explosive. You can't do this. This is our home too, Jason. Tell her she can't do this. I watched as Jason read the letter, his face cycling through shock, anger, and then a flicker of something else, perhaps the first dawning of understanding about the consequences of his actions. Mom, you're overreacting, he said, his voice lower now, attempting a reasonable tone. Let's talk about this like adults. Whatever upset you, we can work it out. I tried to talk about it, I reminded him. Your response was to shout that I couldn't argue with Amanda in her house. But this isn't her house, Jason. It never was. That was just an expression, he protested. I didn't mean it literally. By this point, Amanda had abandoned any pretense of composure. She began pounding on the door with both fists. You ungrateful old woman. After everything I've done to improve this dump, you can't just throw us out. I winced at the vitriol in her voice, but held my ground. All your legal documents, mail, and personal items are packed in the garage. The side door will open with the code 1234. Once you've removed your belongings, that code will also be changed. Their protests grew louder, attracting the attention of my neighbors. From my window, I could see Mrs. Abernathy across the street watching from her porch. 2 doors down the Hendersons had paused their gardening to observe the unfolding drama. I hadn't intended to create a public spectacle, but perhaps there was value in having witnesses. I'll call the police, Amanda threatened, her face red with fury. This is a legal eviction. You're welcome to do that, I replied calmly. But since you never signed a lease, never paid rent, and have been living here solely through my goodwill, you may find the law isn't on your side. I didn't mention the documentation Barbara had prepared, demonstrating their financial exploitation and plans to take over my property. That would come later if needed. Jason's approach shifted to emotional manipulation, his voice cracking with well-practiced vulnerability. Mom, please. Where are we supposed to go? We don't have anywhere else. You can't just put your own son out on the street. The guilt stabbed at me momentarily, but I reminded myself of the emails discussing renovation plans when the house is ours and the research into declaring me incompetent. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a calculated plan that had nearly succeeded. The hotel is paid for 1 week, I repeated. You're both educated adults with marketable skills. I suggest you use that time to secure jobs and find appropriate housing. Amanda's next tactic was to create a scene dramatic enough to either shame me into relenting or potentially support later claims about my mental state. She collapsed onto the front step in theatrical sobs, wailing about my cruelty and ingratitude. After all we've done for you, you'd be lost without us. You can't even take care of yourself. I remained silent, letting her performance play out without an audience. Through it all, I watched Jason's face, searching for any glimpse of the son I had raised. He seemed torn between comforting Amanda and continuing to plead with me, his expression cycling through anger, disbelief, and desperation. The situation escalated when Amanda's parents arrived, apparently summoned by a frantic call from their daughter. Douglas stormed up the walkway, his face flushed with indignation. "What the hell do you think you're doing to my daughter?" he demanded through the intercom. Enforcing my property rights, I replied simply. Your daughter and my son have been asked to leave my home after taking financial advantage and attempting to take over my property. Barbara had advised me to remain factual and calm, avoiding emotional accusations that could be twisted later. I followed her guidance, even as Douglas made threats about lawyers and elder services. I welcome legal scrutiny, I assured him. My attorney has thoroughly documented everything, including their research, into how to declare me incompetent and take legal control of my home. That statement created a telling moment of silence. Douglas turned to Jason with a questioning look. Jason avoided his gaze, suddenly very interested in the pattern of my welcome mat. The standoff continued for nearly 2 hours. Neighbors came and went, some offering silent support with their presence, others pretending to retrieve mail or water plants while witnessing the drama. Eventually, Amanda's mother, Barbara, took control of the situation. "This is accomplishing nothing," she said firmly. "Amanda, stop crying and get up. Jason, start getting your things from the garage. We'll sort this out later." Under Barbara's practical direction, they began moving boxes from the garage to their vehicles. With each trip, Jason's shoulders slumped further, the reality of their situation apparently sinking in. Amanda continued her tearful performance, but with diminishing conviction, as even her parents seemed tired of the dramatics. As they worked, I noticed Jason pausing at the garage workbench where Thomas's tools still hung, each in its designated spot. He reached out to touch a hand plane his father had used to teach him woodworking basics as a child. For a brief moment, something like shame crossed his face. When most of their possessions had been loaded, Jason approached the intercom one final time. The anger had drained from his expression, replaced by a weariness that aged him visibly. "Mom," he began, then stopped, seemingly uncertain what to say. "This isn't right. This is my home, too." "No, Jason, it wasn't. It was a place you were welcome to stay temporarily while getting back on your feet. That arrangement was taken advantage of and distorted into something unhealthy for all of us." He was quiet for a long moment. "You don't understand what it's been like. Amanda had all these plans, these expectations, the pressure to provide a certain lifestyle. So you decided to take mine instead of building your own." The words weren't meant to wound, merely to state the truth we both knew. It wasn't like that. Not at first. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture so reminiscent of Thomas that my heart ached despite everything. Things just got out of hand. Yes, they did. And now they need to be set right. Amanda called impatiently from the car, and Jason's moment of reflection vanished. "This isn't over," he said, his voice hardening again. "You'll regret this." I watched through the window as they drove away, followed by Amanda's parents in a separate car. Only when they were completely out of sight did I allow myself to sink onto the sofa, my body trembling with the aftermath of adrenaline. The house felt impossibly quiet, empty in a different way than before they had moved in. But as I looked around at the restored photos of Thomas at his cabinet, returned to its place of honor, at the spaces reclaimed from Amanda's systematic erasure, I felt something else breaking through the exhaustion. Relief. And beneath that, the first tentative stirrings of peace. The days following their departure were strangely disorienting. After nearly 2 years of navigating around other people's preferences and avoiding conflict in my own home, I found myself almost tiptoeing through rooms, half expecting to be criticized for making too much noise or using the wrong coffee mug. Freedom, I discovered, requires its own adjustment period. For the first week, I slept poorly, startling awake at small sounds and checking the security cameras whenever the motion sensors activated. Barbara had warned me that Jason and Amanda might attempt to return, possibly, when they thought I was out to take items they felt entitled to, or to create further confrontation. I installed additional cameras and kept my phone nearby at all times. But no attempt came. 3 days after the lockout, I received an email from Jason. It was brief and cold, providing a forwarding address for any mail, and stating that Amanda's father would be in touch about resolving this situation legally. The threat was clear but empty. They had no legal claim to my home, and we both knew it. The emptiness of the house began to weigh on me. Without the constant tension of navigating Amanda's territorial behavior, I found myself facing the deeper loneliness I had been avoiding since Thomas's death. My home was mine again, but the victory felt hollow in the quiet evenings. Catherine visited, often staying for dinner, and sometimes overnight. "You did the right thing," she reminded me, during a particularly low moment when I questioned everything. "They were taking advantage of you planning to take your home. What kind of mother would you be if you allowed your son to become that person without consequences?" A month passed. I began reclaiming spaces in more meaningful ways than just returning furniture to its original positions. I replanted Thomas's garden, adding new perennials alongside the few that had survived Amanda's landscaping purge. I reopened my home office, setting up my computer and bringing out the architectural drawings for projects I had put aside when they moved in. Barbara kept me updated on the legal front. As expected, Amanda's father had consulted an attorney who quickly advised them they had no case. Without a lease rent payments or any legal claim to the property, they were classified as guests who had overstayed their welcome, not tenants with rights. The first real test came when I ran into Barbara and Douglas at the grocery store. They pointedly turned down another aisle to avoid me. It stung not because I valued their opinion, but because it confirmed the permanence of the rift with Jason. Their loyalty was to Amanda, which meant my son was firmly in a camp separated from mine. 3 months after the lockout, I received another email from Jason. This one was different, longer, less defensive, with the first hints of acknowledgement. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," he wrote. "Amanda and I have separated. I'm staying with a friend and looking for work. I'm not asking to come back, and I know I have no right to expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that I'm starting to understand what happened and my part in it." I read the email multiple times, trying to gauge its sincerity. Was this the beginning of genuine remorse, or another manipulation? I showed it to Catherine, who remained skeptical. "Actions, not words," she cautioned. "Jason has always been good at saying what people want to hear when he needs something." I responded with a brief acknowledgement, neither embracing reconciliation nor closing the door. "I'm glad you're reflecting on what happened. I hope you find your way forward." The email exchange brief, as it was marked a turning point in my healing. I began to separate my grief over losing the son I thought I had from the reality of who Jason had become. Perhaps there was hope for change, perhaps not. Either way, I needed to build a life that didn't hinge on that possibility. I joined a support group for parents estranged from adult children, finding unexpected comfort in sharing experiences with others who understood the particular pain of that loss. Many had stories similar to mine: adult children who had taken advantage financially, emotionally, or both. Some had found paths to reconciliation. Others had made peace with permanent estrangement. All emphasized the importance of maintaining boundaries, regardless of the outcome. "Love without boundaries isn't love," said Eleanor, a soft-spoken grandmother whose story of financial exploitation by her daughter had brought tears to my eyes. It's self-destruction disguised as sacrifice. Those words resonated deeply. How often had I confused self-erasure with motherly love? How thoroughly had I convinced myself that maintaining peace at any cost was the same as nurturing relationship? As spring turned to summer, I made a decision that surprised even me. I contacted a realtor about selling the house. The home that Thomas and I had built, that I had fought so hard to reclaim, had served its purpose in our lives. Now it felt too large, too filled with memories both beautiful and painful. "Are you sure?" Catherine asked when I told her. "After everything you went through to keep it." The battle wasn't really about the house, I realized as I said it aloud. It was about not being erased, not being manipulated out of what was mine to give or withhold. Once I reclaimed that power, the house itself became less important. I found a lovely single-level home in a planned community 15 minutes away, with just enough yard for a small garden and a spare room that could become a new workspace. The sale of our larger home would provide more than enough for this purchase and a comfortable cushion for my retirement. Before listing the house, I invited Jason to collect any childhood mementos he might want. It was a gesture of both generosity and closure. To my surprise, he accepted arriving alone one Saturday morning. The meeting was awkward but civil. As he boxed up old trophies, yearbooks, and the wooden chess set Thomas had made for his 10th birthday, we engaged in careful conversation. He had found a job at a small marketing firm. He and Amanda were divorcing. He was seeing a therapist to understand the patterns in his relationships. I let her convince me we deserved more than we were willing to work, for he said quietly as he wrapped the chess pieces in tissue paper, "It was easier to take from you than to face my own failures." I didn't absolve him. That wasn't mine to give yet. But I acknowledged his steps toward accountability. "I hope you find your way, Jason. I really do." "The new house," he said hesitantly as he prepared to leave. "Would it be okay if I visited sometime? Not to stay, just to visit." "Perhaps," I said. "Let's see where the road takes us." It wasn't forgiveness, not completely. But it was an opening, a possibility that whatever relationship we might rebuild would be based on mutual respect rather than exploitation. The day I moved into my new home, Catherine and Barbara helped me arrange furniture and hang pictures. We opened a bottle of wine as evening fell, sitting on the small patio that overlooked a community garden. To new beginnings, Catherine toasted, raising her glass. "And to endings that make them possible," I added. "I've lived in my new home for 8 months now. Jason visits occasionally, always calling first, never staying more than a few hours. Our relationship is tentative, a seedling that might grow into something sturdy or might wither away. I've made peace with either outcome. What I couldn't see during those difficult years was that by allowing myself to be gradually erased from my own home, I was teaching Jason that my boundaries, my needs, and ultimately my selfhood were negotiable. By reclaiming my space and my dignity, even at the cost of temporary estrangement, I offered him a more valuable maternal gift, the example of self-respect. Sometimes love means standing firm when every instinct cries out to yield. Sometimes the kindest thing we can do for those we love is to show them that we value ourselves too much to be diminished by their demands. And sometimes the home we most need to build isn't made of wood and stone, but of boundaries strong enough to shelter our spirits. I'm sharing this story not to vilify my son or his ex-wife, but to remind anyone listening that it's never too late to reclaim your space, your voice, your right to exist fully in your own life. The house I built with Thomas was beautiful, but the life I'm building now on my own terms may be my finest design yet. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between keeping peace and maintaining your dignity? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. If this resonated with you, please like and subscribe to support the channel and share with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to take back their power. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, the most important home you'll ever build is the one within yourself where your own worth is never in question.